This is Senate Appropriations. We're continuing our work on the 24 budget, and we're going through one-time requests. We need to go through not only what the House did, what the governor proposed, but the extent to which something is not on the list that we want to put on. I see a lot of people here who have represent entities that have submitted requests. I don't know exactly what we'll get to today, but I would like to assure you that if you made your request known, that we will do our best to weigh them all out. And if you're not here, it would not determine whether you got something or whether you did. Just simple as that. I think requests are now over what, 400 million or so, and so we're working from what the House did, but I just need to caution that we need to go back, excuse me, and see if there are other things that maybe the House did not accept that we want to revisit, and that there have been a couple of other additions to requests on the one time, including a $25,000 contribution because they decided it's part of that healing process with the victims of St. Joseph's. Senator Sears, you remember, we put, they're doing a monument. So 25,000 has been requested for that. So I think that we'll just keep going, and we left off on the conservation districts.
We did, and Sarah and I were able to have some conversations with the administration folk in ag. So there is the base general fund, which is 362, which was the 112 plus the 250 you added for this current fiscal year, FY23. And then there is a 4-year grant. There's actually 2 4-year grants. One is $2.3 million that is distributed out through the council to the districts over that 4 years. That's
the Clean Water Council,
the Natural Resource Conservation Council, which is for the agricultural water.
Which is different than the clean water.
So we're the agricultural clean water program. So, so the underlying money is the clean water money, and that the amount that goes out across all the districts is 2.3, and then there's a $400,000 grant that goes out to one district that does a lot of work for 4 districts. And so that $2.3 million grant, which we're in the first year of the 4-year cycle, is about $563,000. And it'll, by its 4th year, it'll be about $580,000. So that's the sort of baseline direct to the capital money, that 565 right now, plus the 362 that is in general fund base.
So the 562 is it divided amongst 10 of them? So because you got four in that other group.
So my understanding is that we have the detail. We haven't. It was just later this morning that we'll get it more clear on the granular level. But it's by district. There's certain categories for under that 563, and then the one that goes to one district is, I think the other districts don't get as much because they get help from the other district. We'll work all that through, but I just wanted you to have the big picture.
So part of what we were looking at is if we were to do a carve out, but it sounds like that in fact that's happening essentially now. If they've got a 4-year guarantee that you said 4 years,
Yeah,
funding through the clean water, because that was what we were saying should be the a logical source to support their work. So they wanted 3 million on top of the 2.8 that they wanted 3 million a year plus what they're getting over this 4-year period plus the base.
Well,
I don't.
The 3 million would go into this. They wanted that in their base so they could plan every year, but the eastern side of the state, the Connecticut River area doesn't fare too good because most of the work is over along Lake Champlain with the western side of the
Well,
state.
60% of the state is in the Connecticut, it's in the Champlain Valley watershed, which is probably influencing. So the question becomes one of, the House put in 970, let's see,
They put in $1 million.
they put in the million, sorry,
One time.
a one-time money, that's only one time, which would be to support work. So we had talked about, seeing what we could do to add something to their base. We took, which is what they want, but base funding is really tight. And so I think we had said yesterday we would try to put on our base request another 250 to the base. The question then becomes what we would do for one time and what they would use it for. Now, would it be over and above what the clean water fund, when that got created to meet the TMDL requirements, we actually allocate a percentage of the state's revenues from the rooms and meals tax to the fund. We're already allocating general fund to that clean water. So the question becomes, how much more of general fund over and above what we're already allocating do we feel is reasonable here? So
You're going to go part to the base and part.
I don't know. We have to decide. I said we would put 250 on the base for us to see whether that could be accommodated. And then the question is, if we give one-time money, what would it be used for over and above what the projects that would come through the clean water? So that's my question. If they got one-time money, you can't hire ongoing staff. It's going to be very project specific. And that's my question. Do they have, and maybe we can't answer it right now, but I'm sure somebody's listening that will find out if you have one-time money, what would it support? Last year we did one-time money and it was for a very specific time-limited activity. And I can't remember, was it equipment or training or something? So, is that a rhetorical question?
No, I'm saying that as a statement.
Do you know, Sarah, you were there?
Not beyond what's been discussed here. Let me see if I can find support behind the request and the documentation.
Well, it's a good idea to find out what they want to do.
I think there's a tendency we can't give you base, so we'll give you something one time, but if you're gonna give one time, then you need to be very clear what it is.
Did we give them one time last year?
Yes, we did. We gave
So
them
why don't we ask them, well, what did you do with the one time?
the one
from
time,
last
they
year?
had a very specific use that they had identified that we supported. And it was-
I think it's right as capital, but I think they might have used some of it for.
So it was,
They did, they bought, I know one district, Meadowy, area, they bought a building down there because. they
Meadowy Valley.
Yeah.
The Meadowy,
Yeah, they bought
I'm
a,
very proud of that.
and so they used it for updates to cat, so one place bought a pickup, I think, to take some of the equipment around.
When I was a young kid, Harry Waite, when I was first running for the Senate, Harry Waite took me around the Meadowy Valley and slugging boots around.
so I'm gonna suggest we move on. We'll see if we gave them money. We don't know how much one time we have, but we can hold this and then put the 250 base increase on to support their base appropriation.
And sustainable jobs, they haven't gotten back.
No? Okay. And so I think we'll go down to expediting.
Can I just ask a question on sustainable jobs and salvation farms? Is that gonna be within?
Line 21 on this sheet right here.
Oh, we're using that. sheet.
Well, we're
But
using
it
both.
is, it's here.
It's here,
Well, that's-
crosswalk.
That's what I'm gonna ask. You gave a $10 million target for ag, and I'm just wondering if the Salvation Farms and Sustainable Jobs fall under that target. When we get to it.
We'll have to see. Well, you've already spent over 7 of it. But you still got a couple million, Bobby.
This is
You
even a million.
want to go,
Yeah,
yeah, that we haven't talked about yet. And that
Start saving that for later.
it's gonna leave very little for the ag program.
well, as they proposed it, but of course, the administration did not propose doing a very significant financial package for organic farmers.
Well, I don't know if it was anything at that point because it hadn't floated to the top.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, we're gonna have to operate within somewhat of that box.
We can't use the credit card for some of this. You don't have to answer
You
that.
know, where your rear end, you sit on the blister, and we've sat on a few blisters around here, so I'm not going down that road again. Yes,
I was able to find some supporting documentation behind this request. As you charged for calls for the, through the public hearing, there was a request for between 2.6 and $3 million for additional base funding to support the NRCC. I think the House within their construct was able to dedicate $1 million of one-time funds for that purpose.
but you know as well as I do, base and one-time are 2 different things, and you can't staff up with $1 million and think that you're gonna get very far if 10 months later you're shutting back down. So if you're substituting one-time money for base, then the question would be, what are we trying with it? Would it be something that's in addition to the work that would be doing through the Clean Water Fund, and how many different ways can we be funding certain activities? So that's gonna be the challenge for us. So it sounds like we don't have any base to give you, so you wanted 3, we'll give you 1.
Then they'll hire people to come back next year and say.
I'd like to-
No, but that's what we can't do. We can't do that.
I'd lot rather get the base up some than that one time.
All right, well, we'll do the base and put that on and see what we can do.
That one time is good if you got one project that, or 2 or 3 projects you want.
Or if you want to, in fact, within your $10 million box, do more for them, that you can put that on your list.
It would be one time.
No, yes, that would be one time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the conservation districts did send out some information, and they did comment on the need for base and what it would be used for working with landowners, municipalities, and so on. So a few paragraphs, but a long list of signatories onto that letter. So,
For the one,
the base, yeah, they are definitely.
And let me tell you, we've got a lot of competition for the base. We've got all our healthcare providers. We've got FQHCs that say they need 6.9
I
million.
agree, I'm just saying
Got
that
adult
they did
days.
send us some information.
I know
so
they
we
did,
have-
I know. And the one thing I would say is we have not probably received any request, maybe most people would maybe question 1 or 2, that don't have a merit or an explanation or justification. We're just going to have to say, what do we have? How do we target it? And is this going to be, and if we're giving one time, then it's not going to be like a grant. Well, we got it for 1 year, so we'll come back next year and say, now replace or continue the general fund. It's just not going to work. So if we do something one time, then we need to have some explanation from the organization what they would use it for. Because if they're going to use it to just hire staff and build base costs of expenditure of one-time money is not the route. So we'll put the 250 on the base, which is the same as we gave them last year. And then we'll see, but at least we know that there's money flowing out to them. And in a multi-year, over $500,000.
Yeah,
So,
that'll put them up to about seven.
and then
Something.
And then the Salvation Farms, the question was not what they're doing, the question was the extent to which that investment benefits the entire state.
So, which it does.
Well, I assume it does, because the money goes to the produce goes to the food bank, and they have a statewide distribution, but I think Senator Sears and other people are concerned, they have gleaning operations, and why are you selecting one?
So roughly all of the vegetable farms across the state, and I'm not, I think the number we were given is 26% of everything that all of the vegetable farmers across the state produce can't be used to go directly into markets. So without that, without the gleaning portion of that 26% is a waste to almost every farmer in the state that does this. And they go in and they use that 26%. And what it does for all farmers that are going into the gleaning is it gives them an outlet to increase their income, because that 26% doesn't become a total waste.
And they give them a charitable contribution value for the gleaned products. The question becomes one of which I think Senator Sears, I don't need to pursue your question if you're satisfied in terms of how all areas of the state benefit from this.
Yes, I'm satisfied.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I mean, I just would want in the future that we think of because there are 5 other gleanings. There's no question about the cleaning of the
There's an organization, Salvation Infant Farms is the leading organization of the 6. They help develop the web-based system where the products from all the other gleaners go through to do that.
I just didn't know if the ag committee heard from the other gleaners, or maybe in the future we could think about how, because I don't think the Wyndham County one's going to be shipping food all the way up there, but I don't want to take away from the great work that Salvation Farms doing. In the future, let's think about it.
They worked with the Southeast Prison. They have a whole program in the correctional facility in the Southeast. So they have done a lot of work both in southern Vermont and.
So the 500,000 would be for capital and setup. It's not an ongoing
It's a
expectation.
one-time investment that would allow Salvation Farm to build a permanent surplus crop aggregation and processing center. And they've used in the past, they were part of the backbone that created the Food Venture Center in Hardwick. They, as the Food Venture Center in Hardwick grew, they moved to Winooski during COVID. They lost their place in Winooski.
They went up to Franklin County for a while.
They went up to Franklin County for a while. What this will do is give them a permanent spot and that they can work from.
All right, I don't mean, I'm right there with Senator Perchlik. I'm not arguing the merits and the proposal. We're just trying to understand how this investment, in fact, will benefit other organizations that are in the business of cleaning up.
I'm just trying to answer the question.
So the question becomes one of, do we want to close this out and get this capacity set up? And I think people are saying yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on then. And the next one is requested by both the House and the Governor, and that's expediting competency and sanity evaluations.
So
I think we should probably want to do that.
we should probably want to do that, but I'm not sure who pays for it.
Well, it
And
goes to DMH.
I know, but I don't think there's some confusion there. I believe either the state's attorneys or the defender general or the legal aid generally pay. That was what the testimony was in S989.
Do you,
I have no problem with spending it, and if S89 passes, then they'd be able to use doctors, psychologists who are doctors,
Doctoral level psychology.
doctor levels, thank you.
but that currently goes through DMH.
Yeah, it's confusing
So
because,
yeah, because of the,
because I was told that part of the problem was that it's actually the Defender General who asked for it and their budget pays for it, or the state's attorney asked for it, and their budget pays for it.
Adam, do you have any
kind of the fix that.
thoughts on
It may be time
when
for
DMH,
DMH does
it must
but I
be, this is when
think it's
DMH
built
is.
into some of the requests from DG and H and the DH.
Those are expert witnesses.
Yeah, they're usually,
They,
the expert are either the state's
evaluate.
expert or the
They're
defense's
evaluators,
expert.
they're not witnesses necessarily.
So,
If they're evaluated competency.
They are, which they would be.
And so,
Well, I'm gonna suggest that DMH wouldn't request it if they weren't paying
Well,
for some of it. Do you wanna hold it?
no, but I just wanna,
clarify.
when we get, I'd like clarification before we vote on the budget. Which budgets,
Or maybe all of them, depending on the
Yeah.
circumstances.
where they all are.
Is that something we can, send out a request, Sarah?
To find out if there's other money in other departments and how the
Well,
flow of,
yeah.
how people
And
access.
to be clear, out of those entities, are they all paying for evaluations,
fine, we
but,
got
under different circumstances? And because they're all being picked up by the state in some
Yeah,
form or other?
Yeah, I mean, it's all state money, but it's who's,
Well, if 89 passes, there will also be some obligation on the part of the defendant to pay
right,
for it.
DG
Yeah,
pays for it.
yeah, so I don't know.
All right, so we'll
We'll try and
say,
get a little map of.
if we can get additional information, I think,
We do the 105,000, I have no problem with that.
okay. I am waiting, from DMH. This did not come from the governor, and it has to do with the, purchase of another house. And so it's coming from, the Housing First entity, Pathways, to purchase a second building in
When it's-
Burlington.
when it's done with government money, what are the requirements under the, you're actually buying the house and remodeling it? And I don't know what the deal is, but I'm, over the years, I've seen these things happen, and the worst one was Camp Ewanaki, where we gave, and I don't know what we got back when Camp Ewanaki closed, but that was prime land on Lake Champlain.
Well, even with the disputed Newbury facility,
Right.
there are provisions where the state's interests
Yes, I
are
wanna-
protected.
Yeah, if we're gonna agree with the house, I wanna make sure there's provisions there to protect the state.
But this didn't come from DMH, and so the question really becomes one, how does this fit within their continuum? And is this where they would want to recommend any expenditure first? That's really over anything.
Generally, we've done contract agreement for apartments or whatever with Pathways. This sounds like a new program.
Well, no, and we did it before. There's a Soteria house in operation now, and it was an alternative to provide a therapeutic environment using a non-medication approach.
I didn't know that.
Huh?
I didn't know that, but I'm not opposed to the idea of area. What I am concerned with is what arrangements are made with the state. If we
If-
fund 985,000 for buying and remodeling a home.
That's out of general fund too.
It's one-time money.
Is that one time?
I think.
Yes, it is one-time.
Is that, how does it fit into the mental health system?
I'm gonna hold it until I get our feedback. I asked, I don't know if Shayla will be coming in, but I really want to get their input. Because we have everybody telling us what a department should be spending money on. And we need to get some direct testimony as it relates to the department that has the administrative responsibility. I would agree that if we're putting forth almost $1 million, then the state in any kind of agreement has got to have its investment protection. And that's really what you're talking
You
about.
did have language to that effect in BAA for the Howard Peace Corps.
Right.
And that's a DA as opposed to Pathways is not a designated agency. It's a specialized.
It's more like akin to the proposed nuclear,
I would think so. Yeah. Where it's a treatment.
where we're putting sizable dollars into.
So it does treat people from across the state, so it's.
But yes, no, it's no question about that.
Right.
It's the treatment modality
Right.
that got added. I don't remember 5-6 years ago. I think we opened up that program. It was part of the mental health. It was a
I think there's not an objection from my point of view to the program, it's a concern about what happens.
if in fact the program
Right,
went.
it should be similar language as we're doing with either Newberry or
If we do it.
if we ever build Newberry.
And-
If those that are listening to Newberry. It's not a done deal.
No, everything is still pending. All right, so we're gonna see if we can, I'm gonna hopefully get a better understanding, recommendation, how this would fit. On the basis of, for example, we do know DMH proposed, and this was part of their budget, is a facility in the Northeast Kingdom. And that came in and was included in the governor's budget and was recommended as part of what they needed for their treatment system. This is a provider coming in saying, we think DMH needs it, and pony up almost $1 million to provide the facility. So I don't know if this was considered in DMH's budget deliberation and not included. And they decided that the facility that is in the governor's budget was of higher priority. It sounds like this wasn't part of their request. So I do think we need to be somewhat sensitive to the experience and the recommendations. Okay, so we'll move on because we'll see if we can get a bit more on that. Now we're down to Green Mountain Care Board, and the House and the governor are all in agreement on what needs to be done. These are all database and tools necessary to support the work of the Green Mountain Care Board. And I swear the state is going to get worn out. We pay for it so many different ways. But we took the testimony, and it is,
They need it.
they need it.
That's what,
Well, the data,
yeah.
can't do without.
No, you can't, man. So do you want to close those sections out and agree with the governor and, okay, now, we have the refugee resettlement, and that was $1 million, and the House split it up into 2 pieces. But my understanding is that the inventory, we put money in the BAA.
And you had some directive language.
And so the question becomes one of, we don't think we need to split out and have all this inventory and needs assessment, that is something they can do and would be permissible under the money we already appropriated.
That's what the agency's response was. That we
Just keep the $1 million.
just keep the $1 million whole, and you did to hold basically that language that's in, and that would come out of this bill, the assessment language that was
The
several. pages long.
language in 2 would come out.
The language in 2 would come out, and a language in E 300 point something, .1 would also come out. That went with the 25.
And the 25, and that one would be, and we would make the 975 the million.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, we have more studies, assessments, and inventories.
Should be an office of inventory.
Well, Stephanie is saying, we've got so many lists of requests, she needs a list of her lists at this point. Okay,
This is only a $10 million
But
thing here.
what
This
is
is-
that for?
this is the, healthcare, you're talking about the 10 million?
Yeah,
But we
no, I'm
number
talking
3.
about 4.4 and 5.7,
Right, oh, you're on the blueprint,
number 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the hub and spoke program.
right, so this is the
Oh,
2-year pilot.
yeah, but you're beyond the,
You know,
sorry,
we're going down the list.
you're going down the list, page, line 32 on your money sheet.
I don't have a money sheet.
We had it yesterday, but here, we'll get you one.
Yeah, I wasn't able to print it out. That's the problem. I don't know. My printer would not accept it.
And I'll just let you know, I rearranged so that all the blueprint pieces would go together. That's why it looks a little different here. That the blueprint in the words of the bill is coming ahead of the $10 million
Oh,
piece.
that's why.
Because
Senator
it's-
Sears is out of sequence.
Uh,
And the blueprint starts in, it's because it's mostly global commitment, it starts in 301 and then it's in a couple other places, but I wanted to keep it all together on the purposes of the sheet.
All right, but I want to go back to line 32 on the sheet and just close out the need to keep our healthcare providers. This is just keep them stable and operational. And can you explain and I think we did this, the 13.
The 13 was an error, that we put it in the wrong place. The 13 is actually just federal spending authority that's needed. When we put the bill together, I thought it belonged with this $10 million, this is not.
So we should just cross
So that crosses out, we need to put that 10 million, that 13 million in a separate federal fund spending authority for the,
And so the House agreed. I think all the comments we're getting from healthcare providers would suggest that they're having difficulty. So I've got an okay by that already. I don't know, must be, I thought it was okay.
I got an okay there too.
Oh, good. So I think maybe we've done that.
Okay.
Now, now we're down to Medicaid redeterminations, and we absolutely need to do that because that's the bridge to support the higher caseload during the period of time before all the redeterminations, so that we know once we get through that redetermination process that has been started, we're going to see a decline in caseload. And so this is supporting that higher caseload during that time limited period of time before the redeterminations are completed and the number goes down. Because we know we haven't terminated anybody for how many years?
3 years, that's
it's been a full 3 years. And it's also, this is necessary to fund the adopted Medicaid forecast that you adopted.
So this is not really, we don't have any choice, we have to
You
fund
have
it. Although, okay, and the House agreed and we would agree as well. All right, so now we're down to the blueprint.
Pilot, and that's back on page 12 on your language sections.
And the question becomes, one, if we're gonna do the pilot, this, my question is, none of this would be coverable under our opioid treatments. I mean, so much of this is harm reduction and so.
But it could be, it's an expansion to include mental health. if there were co-occurring disorders with opioid, then.
They mostly are,
Mostly, but you'd
75%.
have to do it patient by patient to make that determination of where the funding could come from. But the other question I have is, there are other settlements beside the opioid settlement. So some of the other settlements might actually qualify for use. And I don't know whether we know that or not.
You have to research.
I don't know. Do we know that,
There are
Aaron?
actually settlements that are settled.
There are different settlements.
Is this a 2-year funding or one?
The House did one, but we've talked about it. We said if we're gonna do a pilot, then we fund the pilot. And this idea of doing half an appropriation, either you do it or you don't. Simple as that. Because next year, we don't know if it, what the capability to fund the
Right,
second year would
right.
be.
So where we're supposed to be getting for about, what, 25 million?
Good question.
It'd be a little over $20 million.
I mean, it's such a growing problem.
Oh, it's huge.
I mean, it's an epidemic of proportions.
The questions I have, is, and I assume there will be metrics, who will be responsible for evaluating this pilot in terms of what were the outcomes? What would we be measuring against, in putting this forward? Did you have testimony in health and welfare in terms of the design? I know the design, I've heard from a couple of primary care docs who support it. We know that you need the community health teams with patients that are being prescribed buprenorphine. They're difficult to serve, and you will burn a doc out very quickly if you don't have support around them. But what does this do over and above what the community health teams do now for practices, and how will they measure that the pilot had the desired results? And what would be the desired results?
So the blueprint will be, obviously, we should maybe have the blueprint come in and tell us what their outcomes-based measurements will be. But the expansion is to include other substances beside opiates, beside what's going on now. So it'll include
That's,
alcohol, drugs.
that's,
Yeah, fentanyl, whatever it is. Whatever,
Yeah.
whatever addictive chemicals the individual is on. It will also include mental health treatment, so that we're getting both, that we're getting the co-occurring disorder issue. And so, what will it do? It will demand that we have adequate community health team participation. It's really important to expand, because right now, the people who are in trouble medically have more than opiate addiction and rely more than just on methadone or buprenorphine.
Let me ask, the hubs are the ones that are dispensing methadone.
Right.
And, and is methadone a treatment for meth?
no.
No.
No, it's not.
No.
So when you're talking about
No.
hub and spoke, it seems to me that we're really talking about the spoke, not the hub.
Well, you're also talking about the
Yeah,
hub because it makes recommendations about treatment at the spoke level.
Having gone on for the entire time of the hub and spoke, since the hub and spoke was invented in the Sherman administration, Bennington has not had a methadone clinic. And I think it is irresponsible for us to continue on without something similar to Fat Ladies. Small state minimum. And maybe we should consider a small county minimum around here. I just really think it's,
Well,
I
Essex would
am
make out
more than
compared to
frustrated.
Bennington.
Pardon me?
I said Essex County would come out ahead of Bennington.
I understand that, but I think it's only fair that we have some recognition. We're getting killed. because we have no methadone treatment, and we're supposed to get it. Oh, yeah, it's coming. That's been coming for about 2 years. And I see my opportunity to complain about this. And so now we're gonna put $20 million over a 2-year period into a new pilot project based on the hub and spoke. And I just want to,
And you have no hub.
I have no hub. So I'm a spoke of Rutland, not me, but Bennington County is a spoke of Rutland. As soon as the Rutland Methadone Clinic opened, they were overwhelmed by people, and the 500 number that was considered for both counties was just basically Rutland County, and some people in northern Bennington County can get in. So I realize the health department's doing everything it can to get a provider into Bennington. I applaud that. But it's frustrating to have gone this long. Part of it's our own problem, because when I first approached having a methadone clinic in Bennington, I was shot down by the local leaders. That was about 10 years ago. So it's not all state fault. But since then, attitudes have changed given the scope of the problem. But, and we're having, we had a buprenorphine Suboxone, but as you just said, it burns out doctors quickly. And many of those doctors are either stopping that or retiring. So that's my opinion.
The methadone clinic, they act the nicest thing in the world.
Understood, but when you have a bus to North Adams, Mass, full of folks who have addiction problems, some of them fall off the wagon, so to speak, on the bus.
Well,
Yeah.
North Adams is known as a well-oiled place.
it's the source of a lot of the drugs. So the question becomes one of, do we do it and fund it, or do we not do it? Because 1 year funding out of a 2-year pilot is worthless. If in the sense that it creates tremendous risk that if you don't have the financing available next year and you've spent this money somewhere else, you could have a pilot that hardly gets started before you have to shut it down. I agree. I don't know how to deal with the fact that I also, will get back to the way that we have fractured mental health and substance misuse treatment, because we know, and we've known for years, and I've argued this before, and that is we ought to recognize the fact that co-occurring disorder is the norm, and having different entities and relationships with multiple parts of state government by the provider community is, I don't think, serves us well. But that's a larger issue that maybe we'll take up next year.
Yes.
But the question becomes one of, do we want to move forward with a pilot at this point? And that would mean we would have to put in the requested level. And I don't know if we should, the extent to which we should say we want to have some kind of emphasis on the most underserved areas of the state, which the fact that Bennington County has nothing after all these years, I don't know whether, I hate to put in gratuitous language to do what needs to be done.
But for the pilot, I think it's 4 different hubs in the state. It's not across the state.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. If it goes to
And it's
Rutland,
one time.
Yeah, it's one time.
Forever, and what we need, I think we have language. Should have language.
For
We would
20
ask for some outcomes, some measurement.
For
Yeah, but-
$20 million, what do you expect for a measurement back? How many? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money,
There it is.
$20 million.
And one, I
if you get even higher,
so the expansion places are Addison County,
Which has nothing.
Eastern Vermont, someplace between Burroughs and the Northeast Kingdom. Something in Chittenden County and one in the Department of Corrections.
I'm not voting for it.
Huh?
I'm not voting.
I think we'd be better off.
I think we have to recognize it's a statewide problem, and we can't keep doing pilots and little bits and pieces. And I think it's time, if we're gonna put $20 million into substance misuse and co-occurring disorders, and we should be doing it statewide and not four little regions. Undefined, I have no idea what eastern, between Brattleboro and,
St. Johnsbury, 121.
I know, it's a long way, and I know Brattleboro already has.
That's $5 million a pop.
Yeah. Right, I'm not voting for it.
Well, if you're not gonna vote for it, I do think that we should listen to the blueprint folks. I will certainly support this. This is really important if we're gonna begin to.
Well, I
close
would
down.
vote for it if it was gonna be statewide, but it's not statewide.
It is- the hubs
No, it's
are-
not. The hubs are not statewide.
But wait, do you want them, you don't wanna have a pilot? that
These are
looks at
four.
the Recurring disorders?
Not for $20 million when I've got a crisis in my
It's-
backyard.
It's 2 years.
I have a crisis in my backyard that the state is not helping to the extent that they should be with drug treatment in Bennington County. And I have people dying, we have shootouts, we have all kinds of things happening that are unacceptable. And we're gonna spend $20 million and it's going someplace else. And as a representative of Bennington County, I can't do that, given what I know about my own district. You know, you walk down Pleasant Street in Bennington, you might just as well be in somewhere in Holyoke. Because the level of drug traffic and the level of crime is high.
So I'm going to suggest we defer this. We need to have some offline conversations. And I think Senator Sears' concerned about the fact that we've got a major area of the state that doesn't even have the fundamental treatment resources available, can't be ignored. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think the health department, I think the agency, and we're going to have some discussion about what is this model, how of the extent to which we can address other areas, and how is there something that can be modified here based on the concerns, or we say we're going to do the pilot, and if in fact it does produce good results, then any pilot that does it, then you're going to want to continue funding. But I guess we need to come back to that question about what would be the foundational level of treatment resources available regardless of where you live in the state. And I guess that's the heart of your concern.
Yeah.
And I you know, I've been involved with the blueprint from its, you know, creation. And I don't think we're going to, as an appropriations committee, sort this out. So I'm going to defer it, and we're going to have some offline meetings with the health department to look at this whole issue around the extent to which we're addressing the problems that we're having with drugs in the state, and the treatment and the prevention. And we seem to be focusing more. And
On the other hand, Chittenden County has a huge meth problem, as does Franklin County, in my opinion, from what I hear.
Yeah.
And we have nothing dealing with that.
Same with that.
Maybe that's the next one.
Well, but I mean,
That's what we're talking about.
I know, but
Then we
we should
need
be
to call-
zeroing in
then
on
we should-
methadone.
then we should get rid of the hub, because the hub seems to be a very limited methadone treatment.
Let's talk with the Department of Health.
Well, all right, I guess the question is, do we fully understand what a hub is and what it provides? And in my area, it's Barton, it provides methadone.
Yeah.
It's nothing
If
more
it's
than
not
that.
providing treatment for methamphetamine, you're not getting at what's going on in Chittenden and Franklin and to some extent Addison County, and probably some areas in the kingdom. I haven't seen a huge meth problem in Bennington County. And I just assume not. That's, I mean,
Yeah,
do we even know how to treat that? It's a different, when I was I can only go back to the 1970s when I worked at drug treatment. And that was the most difficult thing because they had no idea what, and those poor folks that were using it, were, literally, their noses are gone, their teeth are gone. I mean, it's horrible.
And their children are at risk.
Yeah.
Because it's such an environmental disaster and burns
Yeah,
and so
definitely.
forth.
Yep.
So I guess we need to more fully understand what this pilot does, the extent to which it's really addressing the variety of treatment issues and addiction. And also, we need a better understanding of if we're building on the hub and spoke, as opposed to how we are, maybe the explanation around hub and spoke expansion isn't the best thing. Maybe it's a blueprint expansion to more effectively address and identify addictions or substance misuse. Because hubs, unless they've been redefined, seem to carry a very narrow, they're methadone. And they're not designed to treat these other drugs. And I guess the question is how we're addressing that. And so
I did provide some language, and I will find that language again and bring it in so we can all look at it. But I think it would be important to have the conversations with DOH, AAHS.
and we can just, we need to
get that set up.
we have to probably see if a subgroup of senators can engage in that conversation to see if we're going to do something that and what we do provides some geographical equity, which is your concern, and the extent to which this pilot is really recognizing the fact that we have different drugs out there and the treatment and the interventions are not all the same.
Right.
Who would you like to reach out to? Reach out to Easton?
I think we will reach out to the central office, AHS, and the health department as CB, and he would send me the Viva, listening to the crowd that we need from AHS.
And then I think it would have to be Senator Lyons and Senator Sears to sit down and see what we can do. And Rich, that's your section of the budget. I don't know if you want to participate.
We'll definitely see.
Okay, all right.
Did you say yes?
Thank you.
And so now we're holding on, so we know exactly what this expansion does. We're gonna hold it and see what we can do. And the issue is not saying that this is something that we want to ignore, we want to address, but we want to make sure that if we're doing it.
We're gonna spend $20 million. We want to make sure.
Well,
What we're gonna get back.
yeah, okay, and I guess what is the evidence base out there for the different treatment modalities? I don't know, you were talking about, we're talking about methadone, but we're also talking about dupe, but I don't know what the treatment is for meth.
There is, other than trying to, I don't know of any, maybe there is some today, but I don't think there is any really. Other than trying to deal with the problem and try to get them off.
So the next one, so we'll set up a meeting and I think we need the director of ADAP and we need to have probably Shayla from the secretary's office, someone from DEVA. And
Probably some of that.
and these. So I'm down to line 36. We aren't moving as fast today as we were yesterday. This is recovery housing. This was not asked for by the administration and it came up and we, and it seems the request has come through from a provider for the Vermont Foundation for Recovery. Well, I think this is, I don't know if that's the new replacement from Mark Ames.
Is it the Turning Point Club?
These are actually residential.
It's the Foundation for Recovery, the actual, it's that separate board and the whole
And
thing.
it's actually the residential homes.
Were they in here?
No, they were not in here.
It's $1 million.
I know, and I think, it just says for housing support. And, this is one-time money, and the question becomes if, we were trying to figure out what it's for. And, if it's to add more staff, which is what we thought for housing support, then this is one-time money to increase an ongoing expenditure. And so I'm gonna hold that until we have a better understanding, because there's no point in saying, here's $1 million one time. And if the goal is we need more people. So all we got was the testimony, we need 1.8 for recovery centers and we need $1 million for recovery housing. And I don't think I have seen any description of what it is, what it would be for, whether it's a one-time request or not. So until we have something like that, it's hard to make a decision, and I'm not prepared to make one today.
They want $100 million for housing support, whatever that means. And then 30,000 for housing voucher program.
Right.
That's different people. It would go to-
That's for their initial.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's one
There's
time.
there's recovery coaching. All of that.
Well, the recovery coaching is
That's
done
in
at the
the-
centers.
from Mill-
That's done at the recovery centers. I don't know, this is for, once again, the Vermont, wait a minute, we've got two things here. And I don't know the difference. The Vermont Foundation for Recovery. And now the next one, it's the Vermont Association of Recovery Residences, which I think is the group that we were looking at.
They also think the Vermont Foundation for Recovery came up with the residential homes. When you look at it online, we're trying to figure that out. So
They came in and asked for both. One we understand, the recovery centers, Turning Point, et cetera. But we need to get some better understanding of what these one-times are for, and whether they actually were base requests and the House just said, well, we don't have any base, so we'll give you some one-time to do something. But what that something is, I think we don't know.
Well, the second one says what it's for. It's just for the first
First one.
month's rent.
For the 30,
Right, we just don't know what the Vermont Association of Government Residents.
for housing support, does housing support mean assistance? You could be doing some first month assistance. So I think we need to have the department come back and tell us, I don't think that was in the secretary's letter, was it?
it actually was.
I think it might be.
They didn't speak to the $30,000 item. They did not support the $1 million housing support.
Right, any specific recovery housing. That's the foundations.
I mean, there's no question Vermont needs more recovery housing. I don't know what this.
No, but who is it, house being contributed?
Houses just pathways, for example.
I don't know. We've got so many different entities that have been created over time.
At least Pathways has a, long-standing evidence-based program.
Working with corrections and with mental health.
Right.
Ourselves to keep track.
But so does Janice probably.
Thank you.
They're separate. They're
They're
really
separate.
separate.
Yeah, they're separate. And I want to know.
Well, that's good. This CHIP is opposed to taxpayers paying for legislative healthcare insurance. CHIP is opposed. I didn't say I was, I just said CHIP was.
Like I said, right?
No, he's opposed to it. He doesn't want to pay for your health insurance, Bobby.
Come on.
All right, so their letter from the agency is not particularly helpful. It just says we're opposed. It wasn't part of the governor's budget. So, I think we've got to, get some more information in order to make any decision. But at this point, if in fact the goal was to get base funding, we are not going down that path. So we need to have a response back. And I guess I asked if Shayla could come in and maybe give us some feedback on these requests. If we're gonna fund them, we should be very clear what it is we're funding, why we're funding it, and the description and justification of the request.
Also, why it's one time and what happened next year.
Well, that's the whole point. If it's to staff up, or to increase wages, if they have staff, those are ongoing costs, and one-time money doesn't do it. I'm going to keep going then. I guess this is something that we set up last year, 38, and that this is the criminal justice reform. We set it up last year,
We did.
yeah.
You actually, I don't know, you said that, but you did carve out a piece of funding for it.
That the agency did not support, because that it's not a certified recovery provider. And the question is, that program got funded and set up last year, and now it's back asking. It seems to me if that was to be funded, it should come out of justice. Is there any money?
Well, it depends on how much we spend on the database, the case management system. And we have the network against domestic violence problem, which is that we told them they could not, we told them to pass legislation saying you can't charge offenders for domestic violence treatment. And if we can't, they can't get the money to pay to do the domestic violence treatment. So they need an extra.
Well,
They need 300,000 in base. They already, in the governor's budget, there's 200,000. They need an extra 100,000 in base. To do that, and they need 200,000.
right, so this is something that just got
For
started.
me, the priority is getting the domestic violence treatment,
Well, it seems so.
because they, it's the biggest crime.
All right, so I guess at this point, we're not gonna agree with the House on that. I'm sure we'll be hearing, but the question becomes sort of, if we end up doing the blueprint and doing more on the drug treatment and the blueprint, then we're gonna have to be looking at how we're allocating one-time money. All right, so now we're back to the coalitions. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how he knows. I would think for primary care, he'd be really concerned. That's what the clinics are dealing with. And that's what would help. This would help them, frankly. All right, so we have the coalitions, and this is, it says cannabis excise. Now, we have 3 million that we have in the base.
We had 3 in the base.
We have 3 million in the base. That's, no, I don't think it's passport.
There's money in there for treatment too, and I know it's gambling, but I don't know that we have that.
It's only 200,000.
And that's 500,000.
Was it 5?
So they want
Well, it's an addictive behavior.
But, yeah, but
So
Are you suggesting sports betting?
excuse me, 250 and that's why 24 and 500.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure they'll ever get to that number.
We're not talking about collapsing into yet.
No, but I'm just suggesting that we're talking about co-occurring disorders. Although they're two different groups, probably.
Well,
Which one are we on right now?
we are on
Yeah,
39, and the question is, the House put in additional general funds of almost 1.6 million. We already have 3 million in the base, so that's a 50% increase. And I don't know where this, I don't think ADAP.
This was also in the GovRec, because there's just,
It's a,
the 1,590,000 was part of the GovRec proposal as well.
it was,
Yeah.
it doesn't show up here.
No.
Oh,
So
and that's in addition to the base.
I don't think so. So, Madam Chair, there was a
Don't think we have
commitment,
3 million in the base?
there was a commitment to spend 3 million on substance use. And that 3 million was intended to come from the cannabis excise tax. The cannabis excise tax this year is just getting going. And
So this is bridge money to get to when that money comes in?
in the E-Board economic forecast, I think there's $4.7 million of forecasted cannabis revenue, of which 1.41 million would be 30%. So 1.59 and 1.41 equals 3 million. So that's why we're just making up the general fund. What we're hoping next year cannabis excise will.
Well, I just happen to have it right here.
In fact, we did the 3 million in the one time last year.
That's right.
Oh, it's not in the
Yeah,
base,
That's one time.
So
okay.
what are they using the money for? If we're just getting started.
Well, these
So
coalitions
what
are out
they
there, they've
doing
been,
with the money?
They've
And
been
that's why the
created.
funky number, I mean, ultimately, this next year, our thought is there will be no general fund interest. You all come. Excise tax.
Well,
What are
and-
they doing with the money today?
well, I think probably this was something that was important to Rich and the coalitions. And they're to work with communities to address their, oh my gosh,
Who knew?
a community response to
Some of the answers. He's
to
very sanitary.
drugs.
We can't find out what they're doing. I mean,
No, there actually is
maybe-
very, for Monica Hutt, the chief prevention officer, I think there's very clear what there's, the RFPs and what the work is.
And
And she was going to send that over. Did you get that, Rich, yet from Monica? Wasn't she gonna
I,
send some?
So did she.
she's gonna send that to me.
I mean, there's no,
so
I don't have a problem with this.
the excise tax, according to, this is Stephanie's estimate, and projected in 24 is 9.9 million.
Yeah, I think this is probably a good idea.
The-
But
that-
it's prevention money, right?
Yes,
what
And
are
it's
we
like,
prevent-
how's that different from the after-school money?
This is a different set of tax rates.
Because the sales tax goes into the ed fund and after school is funded out of that.
Ah, thank
So we
you.
had excise tax and sales tax.
See how far away from cannabis I've gotten this year, just because I said no more this year in cannabis.
Just to be clear, this excise tax is the actual current year FY '23 amount. The 1.4. When we get to '24, it now flows through for 2 years through the regulation fund, because we didn't want that ballooning deficit in the regulation fund. And so the amount that will be available in '24 will be what's the 30% of what's residual coming back to the general fund. Which will now be a smaller number than what you have on that sheet because of the lab.
Oh, yes, I got the lab. That's 800,000 or something for the lab.
Yeah.
Is there a way to keep the expansion from making
cost we've got to spend?
All right, so,
The experience down there.
so this is,
This
is-
maintains the 3 million,
Okay.
approximately, the 1.4 will, right now, it looks like it might come up short a little bit for the first year. But the hope is that next year, when you're building the '25 budget, you have the flow through the cannabis board in an amount that's roughly $3 million as an ongoing source
all right.
for the coalition.
So it's not on top. We don't have 3 million in the base. Well, then my annotation is wrong. Where did I get
That, we might have spoken to you.
We're actually gonna move it out of the base, right?
Well, you would be moving it into the base permanently with cannabis money eventually.
Yeah, it'll be.
Not general fund.
It won't be general fund based, it'll be
Yeah,
cannabis.
But we-
for general fund is one time.
Right.
But
Here.
the activities to date of the coalitions, there is information on that. I don't have
What
it.
they're doing.
Yes, and what they've accomplished so far. So we're
And they've done really good work, is what the reports are.
And how do we measure what they do? I know they have a lot of meetings. My question is, how do we, I know that it's supposed to be evidence-based, but I'm not gonna get into that. I'm just thinking when we are awfully good at, everybody's throwing us, this is gonna be a good idea. How do we, in practice? And the other thing that is always important is fidelity to the model. And I don't know to what extent enough fidelity to the model is hard to maintain because everybody wants to tinker with it. So if you've ever been to any workshops, that's what they talk about is if you're implementing an evidence-based approach, you have to maintain fidelity to the model. And we're going to have that issue with the reach up, I believe, which is their administration's proposal is based on research and evidence, and the House changed the sequencing of payments, which is not, it's moving away from the fidelity. So we'll have a discussion around that. I'm going to suggest then, now that we've got this information, we know it's a bridge to the cannabis revenue, we've got the coalitions in place, we've got the data on their work to date, but we close that out and fund the request here. I'm going to move on.
I still haven't got an answer to my question.
What was your question, Senator Starr?
I'd like to know what they're seeing, we're just getting started to grow cannabis. This is a prevention coalition of that. What are they doing?
No, this is basically,
No.
this is basically saying the revenues that come to the state from that new enterprise will be used to support substance misuse prevention.
And we funded this last year, and this is. the
So-
area.
This is strictly the funding source. The cannabis is the funding source.
This is new funding?
Well, it will be. I mean, we just started the program last October, I think. So we're just starting to get the revenues in.
Well, the
from-
cannabis is new money, but we funded this last year.
There's no-
That's all I was
The
trying to
prevention
find out is what did they do during this past year with the money we gave them last
And we're
year?
asking Monica Hutt to come talk to you
They
so
have
that you get
meetings,
the answers that you need.
Like to go to meeting.
Sorry.
I got a recap. More pages to go.
My wife, they're right home.
Oh, yeah.
All right,
And this is a lot of fun online.
Well, they should be able to document.
And they've got it documented and they've opened, and I can't remember how many, but this would, fully, a full copy.
So next is tobacco substance use, and we put that, the question is, should that be on hold? Don't we have more money coming in? We're gonna check on that.
We know we got the payment for this year, and we're gonna, I haven't been able to check to see how that stacks up against what the expectation was and what that means.
Wasn't in the government's budget.
No.
But we'll find out if this is one time. They also have a request for 1.7 in the base for tobacco prevention. So it's not funded by the House or the governor, but we will look at what the tobacco settlement fund looks like with the payment that just came in and it has.
So let's hold any general funding until we have a sense of that.
but the use of, that does relate very much to the highest cause of death in the state of Vermont.
What, smoking? I'm gonna, the question is, seeing how much money is coming in
Yeah.
before we make a decision to add $500,000 on something. Now we're on the EMS study, and we redid the wording on that to make it clear the Department of Health and would lead the study. The question is that they, $100,000 to help them put that together. Yes.
So this was the one where the house had 18 person, so we struck all that, we just have
We could,
the department do the study on their
wiring
own.
and paper engagements and.
Yeah, but the purpose of the study stayed the same.
Yes.
Yeah, some of
And
those.
so the question is, I would think we need to give them some money as part of that work. And because I don't think anybody is saying that our EMS system is less than fragile.
We just, we would reference it slightly differently than what's referenced here.
So,
But I think so.
so we'll agree to that. Obviously, how we want the work done is quite different in the house. But to give it some money to support the work.
And can you remind me, Stephanie, is the $1 million for training?
No. Oh, the million, this is
Oh,
only.
this is just the.
No, I got that, but the $1 million for training for EMS workers. Is that in the base budget?
That's part of the workforce.
It's part,
It's part-
the
it's
reason it's
one-time-
not here is it's part of the work.
So there's still, after we get through this part of the,
I'm just trying to
we'll have
figure
another
where the pieces
tomorrow.
are.
No, you look in B1101 workforce and economic development, and it's on,
On that list.
it's on line 82. And then there's the money to fund the provider increase. So it's really tackling three things, one of
Right.
which is increased reimbursement to Medicare.
And I thought we agreed to that.
We did.
Went through the-
Well,
You know, it's a problem statewide.
well, EMS.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Because
know.
we just don't have enough of it,
Yeah,
number one.
Right,
Number
and that's
two
why,
is,
that's why I asked the question about the
Yeah,
training.
I've heard, when I had my event in November, the doctor said, go to Albany Med, because if you go to our local emergency room, you could end up in a hospital in Connecticut or wherever they can get some transportation to, because we have so few people. And then when I got to Albany Med emergency room, I happened to talk to a woman who was the emergency in EMS in Cambridge, New York, who expressed the same frustration that she just doesn't have the people. She'd often go to Southwestern Medical Center. It's a nationwide problem, not just in Vermont, but if we can coordinate this.
Right, but that's why I asked the question.
Yeah,
about
no,
the
it's a huge problem. And, getting bigger.
I think it probably is, because so many of them are volunteers and finding, and the training that it takes and the time.
But
It's,
also communities are getting upset at the support that they have to provide for them, like in
Brattleboro,
Brattleboro.
that,
Yeah.
but that was predicted, I think.
People just got really burned out.
So I don't think anybody is quarreling that it's an area, and when we dial 911, we would like to have an ambulance.
Yeah.
So we're gonna,
That was another thing you might not get.
So
Yeah. we're gonna close out the 100,000 to support the work of the study.
so we're gonna put the 100,000 to the health department for the study.
Yes. Yeah, we're only on line 41. We're on line 41.
Now we are at the reach ahead.
And we have some information that was provided by UCF, and I haven't had a chance to read it. It's nighttime, but this pilot has been based on work that has been done in other places to test this approach to supporting people once they leave, to encourage independence, movement off public assistance. We know our reach out caseload went up quite a bit. We put in the VA, we had to put in 7 million. So this is taking the evidence from some other research that's been done and putting together a pilot to really support exiting from TANF or from reach up.
Series of incentives over 2 years.
And it's, it was designed, what they're proposing is based on the design, and this gets into the fidelity. So when it got into the House, they changed the way the incentives were structured and departing from, I think what the research would suggest is the frequency and the amounts that are necessary to support that transition from welfare dependence to work. So if we're successful, this would be helpful because any savings I would anticipate from the caseload going down could help us look at how we can address the pitiful level of assistance that we provide through the Reach Up program. But the question for us and the request from DCF is to go and do the pilot consistent with the evidence and the research.
Well, what the House did is they flipped what was recommended. But the grants that will go out to encourage people along this 6-month interval, the grants were smaller in the beginning as the department designed this, and they got bigger as you went out. What the House did was they piled the money more on the front side than the back side.
And the advantage of doing it outer is just like we know sometimes people will take the early money, run. And so the design, I would assume, is to really support and create that incentive so that you've got that connection to the workforce over a prolonged period of time. I think the House must have gotten testimony. Obviously, advocates would like to have more money up front. The question for us, I would say, is if we're doing something, a pilot on an evidence-based approach, the extent to which we believe in the importance of fidelity to the model. And if we agree with that, then we would do the incentives as proposed by the department.
Is this for the 2 years?
It's for 2 years, and if we are successful, and in this labor force, certainly jobs are very plentiful, then I would hope that we could perhaps get to the point where our caseload goes back down, and then we would have hopefully some money that we could help support the ongoing grants. Yes, Andy.
So are you suggesting on in the language on page 15, like where they, after they appropriate the money, just like what they say to be used for?
So you actually have other language.
I was gonna say, we have other language in that.
Yeah, you would, that's where the main change happened is in the schedule of incentives.
But is this also just like, this is directive that may or may not be in line with the fidelity to the model point?
We could reference that.
Yeah, we could.
But the main thing you want to do is structure the incentives and the other part of the bill to be that way.
But the language in the back of the bill right now is House language that doesn't adhere.
Okay.
It makes sense to, if we move out, our share will go down because if they're working out well, the employer ought to give them a better pay rate.
Well, the other thing is when someone goes to work, there's if it's designed to give incentives, so a portion of your wages are disregarded and therefore it creates a slope off. But this is really to give people in the longer term an economic benefit to maintain. And interestingly enough, financial incentives seem to be effective. They are for smoking cessation as well. And we have never done it for our pregnant women, which I find hard to believe because Rich and I moaned for years about Vermont's high rate of smoking by pregnant women. We're nearly top of the list. And and it seems like we're the only ones that think that's a priority group, but you know, it's low birth weight, it's babies born to secondhand smoke. One would think that would be top of the list. And it hasn't been.
Well,
Maybe we should have some of this prevention and cessation actually be used to provide those cash incentives if the evidence is there as opposed to, I don't know, BCAT.
And
frankly.
I will say in this, as we're encouraging people to leave Reach Up and go to work in homes. We have very little increase support or talk of increase support for the existing Reach Up population. So, yeah, and this seems to be the only sort of money going forward as we're encouraging people to get off. We are facing the issue of the food supplements are going away, housing is becoming more of an issue for the Reach Up population. And I only bring that up because, you know, this is the only money that's really going into this.
But if the pilot succeeds and people can support themselves, a part of the program, then we would have caseload reductions and therefore savings internal to the program that we could redirect to
And
increase those
but I
benefits.
would also say in this, a tremendous barrier to this population going out and getting a job is transportation. And there are only a few levers that can be pushed to help this population with transportation.
Well, they do have money to help support services, and also we know in transportation, we're putting money in to help low-income families with vehicles and with their transportation.
And but I would say to you, if there was any money anywhere, particularly with because of the loss of food and those areas, and coupled with this, that if an area like support services is where they give people the department the flexibility to help individuals as they move.
How much do they have now in their budget for support services?
I don't have it right.
I know it's flexible, and I know that it's been there for a long time to support the
Let me
the development
get through Katarina what the number is, but I would suggest that coupled with that, some money into support services might be a good.
Well, that's ongoing, and we'll have to add that to the base.
Well-
What I'm saying is if you can reduce the caseload, that reduces,
Well,
that generates base
But what
money.
I'm saying, if you need flexibility to get vehicles and do that as you're doing this, and transportation is one of the things that support services can do, we might be able to put some one-time money coupled with this in support services.
Well, we can take a look at what the list looks like. I do think that if this research shows promise, then the advantage is we should start seeing some decline in the caseload and increase of money.
Not questioning.
So I think there's agreement that we will, it's a pilot, and what we should do is model the evidence base and maintain the fidelity to the pilot. The youth development independent living, I think that's the stipend we pay for kids exiting from foster care. And it seems like that says 2 years, and the house was $1 million, and the house agreed, and I think probably this is a group of kids that are vulnerable and need support. This would be it.
Do you want to see if the $500,000 amount fit into the base? Family services.
Well, we can put it on and see, I don't know, as an ongoing benefit. Here's the driver's ed vehicle, and Senator Pertlick and I are well aware of the problem foster children have as teens getting a license. It's not the driver's education, it's not the teacher, but if they can't use the vehicle, and there's a lot of competition, so they were hoping to get a vehicle maybe that could be used for, as part of the state fleet, so that these kids in foster care can get their
Yeah,
license.
because they can't drive the parents, but the parents' car, right?
No,
You
there's,
can't use the school because of insurance. So they don't,
And they can't use the school.
you can't use the school
Because
For the,
Why not?
for the,
as insurance.
the driving time.
If the foster kid's in school and wants to do the school program, they can do the school program, but a lot of the foster kids that are dependents of the state aren't going in school, so they're not doing the school program. So these are the kids that are kind of outside of the school system.
I don't care.
So they have a driver's ed.
yeah,
They have an instructor.
UN Center for some support at this point.
Well, we think actually transportation and a driver's license is kind
Well,
of
there
important.
is, some states have programs for that, for foster kids.
Well, we heard from several people that,
Illinois has it.
It would be one car for the whole state. They would like trade it off. They would take it to county to county. And they little groups
work.
of 4 or 5 kids.
so it's,
So some of those fleet cars.
well,
This would be a new one, and then they would, and then
because you have to have braking on the part of the instructor, so it's not just any car. it's,
No,
you know.
they get it, they said they could work with dealers to get a break, so this money, I think, gets them a car and gets it retrofitted, so it can be a driver's
I'm
license.
fine.
So they're trying to get it through.
It's nice to have something go directly to
in their fleet
kids,
system.
frankly. You know, we pay a lot of professionals around here, but it's kind of nice to.
Yeah, I would,
All right, so this, it reflects what we agreed to yesterday when we were dealing with, and agreed with the House, and that has to do with the GA emergency housing. The governor has proposed a 26.3, and the House moved 7.5 into the base, and we, you know, the issue was, will that be enough? Now, those of us who have had the correspondence from the coalition to, and I guess, it's a group that Earhart used to, and they would still like us to keep our COVID-related program eligibility, and that would only take 77 million was the question. And so the question to me was, did I fully understand? They came in and we had a discussion around the Oregon model, the moving from temporary. What was interesting, we found out that that Oregon model had the conversion of 19 motels, and they, you would think it was statewide, they had ended the issue, but we've already done 13 motel conversions in Vermont. So our experience is really not too far away from Oregon.
given the size of Oregon.
Well,
Yeah.
Oregon's a lot bigger.
So there is a proposal, and we did have a meeting this morning with Gus, and we'll be looking, because we think, in fact, it's going to take many different strategies. There was one about the trailers, manufactured homes. The limitation to that was, you know, some of the lots aren't used because the water can't, you know, there isn't an adequate water supply,
Or it's far away.
or it's far away, or it's not near, you know, services or schools or disruptions. But there might be some cases. So our thought was, rather than being, you know, saying one particular answer, that when we get to our housing discussion, we would look at flexibility and allow some latitude in terms of how we address the housing and how we sort of use a variety of strategies to address
This is for
housing.
winter adverse climate
Well,
weather.
well,
Establishing
Winter.
permanent homes.
and when this, what I'm talking about would be to provide more permanency than motel rooms. But if we were to keep our policy, and we had a lot of discussion when we did the BAA, and that is, how much do we want? Because the more you're spending on motels, if it's 77 million, then you don't have 70, and we don't on an ongoing basis have 77 million. But that was a request that was made, and so I'm throwing it out here. In essence, it's revisiting an earlier discussion that this committee had. But also part of that was this Oregon model, which sounds like a variation on Vermont. And so we will be looking at some language in terms of how much money we have available to
Do
use
we
for housing.
provide public transit from these motels to take these people to their jobs?
Well, many of them are not able to work. They are, there are some that in fact have a disability, or they might be over 65, so they're not in the workforce. A number of them have families with children, and so they do get, that's why location is so important, to be close to public transportation.
Yeah.
And there's some new models now with transportation to support work in a much more flexible way, the micro transit projects. So I just want to bring it up as part of this, and that was,
But are you saying that on the emergency housing that there's, if the house is kind of close to the governor because
yeah,
they
the
increased it a base?
7.5, they took 7.5 of the 26 and moved it into the base.
Do you agree with that yesterday?
And we did agree with it yesterday. The question was, without the benefit of experience, will that be enough? But I wanted to raise the request to revisit that policy.
To keep the hotel program going?
Yeah.
And this wouldn't be, this emergency housing funding, well, some of it could be used for those that would be out of the hotels in July, or they would not meet that, because it's not just adverse weather, it's also for GA for those
Yeah.
that are like.
And adverse weather is,
We go back to the old system where they have only a certain amount of time.
yeah, that's what, yeah, GA, right. Certain populations are eligible who otherwise would not be under those adverse conditions.
Disabled,
Yeah.
children, people with children.
And this is on top. Did you say earlier that we purchased 13 motels?
13, I
13,
thought.
the state,
13, I believe. 19 Oregon had done,
19 in Oregon.
yeah, and 13 here.
So this would be on top of the 13.
Yeah.
well, the 13 is over time, that's years of that.
This is
We
emergency.
could buy another 13 maybe with this.
Well, but until you
This is
do,
not that.
you need to have some capacity to respond to emergency housing needs, and this is what it's for. So I think that this is, the question is, in the end, will this be enough? But I don't think we know at this
On
point.
top of the 13.
But I wouldn't recommend that we reduce the overall amount of the governor's budget proposals.
Do that.
And then we will look at what we're doing through the various housing entities, because we have proposals on the little rental, that loan program. We've got other housing through VHCD. We've got the VHIP program. There's also $1 million in S100 for first buyers, home buyers. So we've got quite an array of proposals within that housing.
So
Okay.
of the 3,000 or whatever the number is, 3,000 people that would be out of the hotels on July 1st, this would be the only pot of money that would help those and those that meet the new criteria. Is that correct, or is there money somewhere else?
No, this I think would be it, would be through the GA program.
I mean, and maybe the estimate was made in consideration of those people, but I'm just concerned what we're gonna do with those people while coming on the street all at once, or between two times, I think, two personally. But I don't have a good answer.
No, and we've already paid over 200 million in motel rooms. And that, what it's done is driven up the purchase costs, since we've heard, because they're, and
But regardless of what we put here, as we look at other housing recommendations in the budget, the money that's there through S100, we'll be able to make some further,
Yep.
put some further language in that'll perhaps begin to answer the question here.
But come July 1,
Come July.
there's problems in a lot of communities. And
And we'll just have to see how it materializes. Some people can solve their problems, as you know, and others are gonna be, need more assistance. We did fund all those teams. And so knowing that the rules are changing, we would hope that all the support teams that we funded, are looking at the individuals. Because that was part of our plan, is to give time so that, they could work with, individuals to, find alternative housing. And there's also money for home share, in S100. Now, we have to put all that into what we can, have for funding for, housing. But those are all the components of S100 that we pulled out and will be considering as part of our, whatever we do with housing. So, I'm gonna suggest that we at least, we don't wanna do anything to, change this amount, but when we look at what we're doing to, increase housing stock and the different methods, how much money that would be, we'll look at it in totality.
So are you agreeing with the House or?
I think we are, because we agreed yesterday that the 7.5 went into the GA base. And then your question and concern, will that be enough in the base? Obviously, you've got 18.8 million more to go with it during this transitional
No,
time.
I've got that, like, we also, when we put the shelters, the 2.5 in the budget adjustment, how does that relate to?
Well, one would hope that that would help provide a housing alternative to motels. That was why we put it in.
Right, it won't be this summer, but it'll have eventually.
And then we also had, we advanced the 25 million for VHCV, and there's nothing that precludes if they could in fact support another conversion. And they're thinking that maybe with the changes in S100 relative to the development of housing, that could accelerate bringing more housing online. Now, I'm going to suggest the HOP grants we've got in a variety of places, and I think we should consider that as part of, that's eviction prevention, part of housing. And we put money in, we had 500,000 in the BAA that we added. And I think that there might be some other money, so let's.
So half of that floor amendment was toward HUP grants, but.
Oh, the 20 million?
Yes.
Wasn't just trailers, it was HOP and.
Yeah.
PT and HOP, huh? So I think we should look at that, the OEO HOP grants as part of S100 for our housing discussion. The food bank, they have asked for 3 million. The big question that has come up and the big concern is the impact of the special add-on benefit that the households got as a result of COVID that has gone away. And the demand for charitable food is probably going to increase. And so the House put in 1 million, the food bank is saying we anticipate increased demand. And they believe 3 million is necessary. This is what supplies food to our local food shelves.
So they asked for 3 million. They subsequently said after and not that we can get it, but they subsequently said that after the increases that they've seen since the supplemental food had gone away, that they 5 million is probably more realistic, but 3 is probably for us.
Well, we can put it down
But
for
this-
3. What are you going to say, Bobby?
No, I mean, the House put 1 million.
They were asked for 3 and they put 1 million.
I think the value of that food stamp benefit was over 17 million.
Well, no, the value of that food stamp benefit was 6.5 million a month. So we're talking 78 million.
Was that 78?
So, and with that, that drop off in that population, these people are showing up at food shelves. And the only system we have to get money back to the food shelves is through the food.
So, three, okay, we'll go with three.
I don't know if the committee is interested in taking a break. I do have to go to Senate Finance.
Oh, yeah, it's 3:00. I think probably we do need a break. This is a good place to break. And then we'll go, we'll pick up from there. Okay, let's take a break. Stephanie, how long do you think you're going to be gone?
Hopefully 15, 20 minutes.
All right, so why don't we come back at 3:20? And we have to be